In today's video, we're going to be diving into the upcoming pattern where we have numerous major snow systems to track across basically most of the United States, from the west to the central to a lot of the eastern states. We're going to be discussing these major winter storms alongside some more major cold air moving in later on. So let's take a look at the 6 to 10 day temperature outlook here from the National Weather Service, and this is going to go from the 11th through the 15th. What we see is that during this time frame, we do see cold air pouring into a lot of the central states. As you can see, especially the further north you are, the more below normal it is. We do see that the Northeast also features some below normal temperatures, as well as the Southwest even. We do have this southeast ridge very present along the southeastern states here. And this is why we're going to see a lot of our storms cut up over top of this. Something like this is going to be a very popular track here over the next couple of weeks. I will say, and I said this yesterday, I do think that this southeast ridge is a little overdone here from the National Weather Service. I think it might be a little bit more secluded further to the southeast, maybe even something like this most of the time. So we could see some cooler temperatures reach further towards the southeast than what this is showing, but I do think that it is going to be a key and very crucial piece to the upcoming pattern and the equation of really what we're seeing. When we look at the precipitation, we see that during this 11th through 15th time frame, almost the entire United States is expected to be at average or above average precipitation, but especially here along the west, and then some of the Gulf states up into a lot of the Ohio Valley and Mid-Atlantic. These two areas are going to feature the most above average during this time frame. Now, the 8 to 14 day outlook here, once again, I do feel like this warmth is overdone to the southeast. I think you can anticipate that it will be a lot further towards the southeast, again, maybe even further than that. But we do see the cold air still spreading through the north central states and northeastern states, where most of our snowfall threats will remain. So it is kind of non-factor, but still, I think this is a little overdone. Precipitation still looking very good for the west, highly above normal, and this actually extends into a bit of the upper Midwest there. And then also for the majority of the east here, we're looking at above normal precipitation. As we take a look at the past 7 days of temperature, so this is the final day of January and then all of our first 6 days of February, we can see things have been quite warm as we were predicting. We see through the central states and Midwest there, up into the Mid-Atlantic at least, we see warmth. And then for a lot of the West, including a lot of the Rockies, we've seen above normal temperatures as well. So the majority of the nation seeing warmth during that time frame, with colder temperatures over the Northwest and a bit of the Northeast here. So yes, we are very aware that it is warm. We've cooled down a little bit. There is going to be some warmer days coming up. It's going to be off and on, especially the further southeast you are. But colder air is coming and snow threats are on their way as well. First off, we'll take a look at the European model here. I feel like the European model in today's runs is the most bullish for major storms and also the most bullish for sustained long-term cold. The GFS model is going to be a little bit more aggressive with that southeast ridge and maybe not as aggressive with a more major storm system that I'm kind of eyeballing. About 10 days from now, the models have been pretty consistent with a major low. The location has not been consistent at all, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, but they are consistent with like a sub 990 millibar low pressure center somewhere in the eastern half of the nation. So we could be looking for a major storm during that time frame, and the key word there is could be. I think that we have strong evidence to suggest that there is a trend towards that, but still, these things are very unpredictable, especially when we're looking at like 7, 10, 12 days out. That's when we want to pump the brakes a little bit, pay attention, be aware, and be kind of preparing for what we might do if this happens. But it's not time to kind of like lock into a solution by any means quite yet. As we take a look at today, I'm going to move us a little bit forward here towards about, let's do 7 p.m. This is probably a little bit after the video will be coming out. And we do see some remaining rainfall showers and thunderstorms here throughout areas like Kentucky and Tennessee, as well as surrounding states. We did have some crackles of thunder in Virginia very early this morning, like just as the sun was coming up. We had Virginia seeing some thunderstorms. And that sucks because I'm doing my vlogs and I wanted to catch the first thunderstorm on video, but I did not because it was so early. But we will catch another one, of course, and many others this year. But yeah, a little disappointed there. We do see a storm system is arriving at the west coast here for later on this evening as this video is coming out. And what we see is rainfall along the lower elevations and more coastal areas of California there, but the Sierra Nevada and a bit up into the Cascades. We are seeing some very heavy snowfall there for states like California, Nevada, and Oregon especially. So that could be a pretty hefty system there. We also have a low moving across Canada between the Great Lakes and Hudson Bay, which usually means colder air is on the way. We see a secondary low offshore of the Northeast there, bringing some snowfall to the New England areas later on this evening on Thursday the 6th here. Let's move this towards tomorrow afternoon, though, for Friday the 7th, and we see this California system is kind of gone ahead and moved up into portions of the Rockies. It's over Wyoming at this point, and we see that the Sierra Nevada, Cascades, and Northern Rockies are seeing snowfall as a result of this, with the heaviest of it being there for Idaho, Utah, Montana, and Wyoming. From that system, we do see some showers and thunderstorms around, perhaps for the deeper south again tomorrow. This is another thing that we've been predicting for over a week now, is the much more frequent thunderstorm activity. January was like historically low thunderstorm and severe weather activity for the most part, mostly due to the freezing temperatures all the way down to the Gulf Coast. It's like, where could there even be thunderstorms? That's how the majority of the month went. But February, with that southeast ridge, has really opened up the door to these potential thunderstorm and severe weather events. So that's why we've seen that uptick in that type of activity. I want to go ahead and take us towards Saturday on the 8th, and we see this system is a very quick mover because day 1 it was over California, day 2 it was over Wyoming here, and now day 3 it's like over the Ohio Valley. So we see in 3 days it's crossed most of the nation. You can imagine that is quite quick for a low pressure system like this. We do see that there is broad low pressure around for the Ohio Valley. If I was to try to create a center of that low, it'd be somewhere in here. What we're seeing is a lot of thunderstorms and showers underneath all of this. It does have a little bit of like a warm front component there, maybe a dragging cold front look here. We do see snowfall over top, perhaps, for the Midwest, upper Midwest in particular, Great Lakes here, maybe even the northern Ohio Valley, seeing some snowfall. And again, there is some wintry weather here across the mid-Atlantic, but the thing is when you're seeing the wintry weather along a warm front, typically that rain snow line is going to continue to move northward, which means that anything that happens in here, you might see flakes, you might see some freezing rain, but if it moves back over to rainfall, it's hardly going to impact anything at all. It likely wouldn't even accumulate in the first place, but even if it did, it's going to be very, very short-lived. So that's why I usually don't try to emphasize these areas of wintry precipitation too much. It's mostly the areas to the north of the low here where they're going to see snow the entire time, where we're actually going to see major impacts from it. As we keep going, we do see that this low kind of meanders. This is about 1 a.m. on Sunday to where we're seeing this low right here. We do see some potential ice underneath that low. So again, Pennsylvania, Maryland, D.C., New Jersey, which is kind of on the northern extent of where we were just seeing the wintry weather before. So there will be a cutoff line somewhere in there where if you're to the south of it, that warm front is going to start to move you up above freezing and into rain. But there could be the threat for that northern area where we initially see the wintry weather kind of developing, where it may become a little bit more than a non-event or a nuisance. It might become actually a pretty impactful situation with this ice. And then there will be another line to watch, which is the line between the snowfall and the ice here, basically between the pink and the blue, where for northern Ohio, northern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, and above, so for states like New York and southern New England in particular, moderate to heavy snowfall will prevail likely overnight Saturday into Sunday as we're approaching the Super Bowl. And that could lead to pretty major accumulation because this is some pretty hefty snowfall we're seeing there. We see this continue on into the next morning, 7 a.m. on Sunday, February 9th. We see this low is pretty well offshore, moving out pretty quickly as it's basically done its entire life by this point. We do see New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, all seeing some moderate to heavy snowfall. Even southwestern Maine seeing some moderate to heavy snowfall there. So again, accumulations might be pretty hefty. Like I mentioned, a good moderate to heavy snowstorm for them up there. What we see by the next day on Monday, February 10th, is again this kind of trend at heavy showers, thunderstorms throughout this southeast ridge corridor here. We see a very flat jet stream by this point, moving straight across the nation. We kind of call this a zonal flow, and typically these feature quick moving storms, not too intense, and overall colder than average to the north, warmer than average for most of the south in many cases. And for the most part, if we do see a major storm, the reason why we don't usually see major storms and zonal flows is because it disrupts the zonal flow. So if we see a major storm, it will no longer be a zonal flow anymore for the most part. So let's keep watching. I want to move us towards Tuesday afternoon, and what we see is more major storm develops, and all of a sudden, it's not a zonal flow. We see all sorts of waviness going on as a result of that. So again, major storm disrupts that zonal flow. We do see a little bit of a low here over Colorado, and we're seeing some snowfall showers up here across the plains and southern Rockies, or central Rockies, I'd say, into parts of the Midwest here. As a result of that, we also see some low pressure growing throughout the southeast, where likely there's some thunderstorms in this area here: Kentucky, Tennessee, Arkansas, areas of Oklahoma, Texas, northern Louisiana, northern Mississippi, northern Alabama there, even northern Georgia. We see likely maybe thunderstorms in this area, but I would say more likely just rain showers along that corridor. And what we're seeing is snowfall for Ohio, Virginia, West Virginia, Maryland, DC, Pennsylvania, parts of northern Delaware as well. We need to really see if a low is going to develop back behind this and we get a warm front, because that could disrupt the snowfall there, or if we're going to see a low try to develop offshore, which could just enhance everything in this area. So let's see what plays out here in just a moment. And we get the low forming offshore. So we end up getting quite a bit of snowfall for these areas, and we see it start to try to mix to ice or even rain for the southern mid-Atlantic. It's more like the similar areas to the previous storm, like northern half of Pennsylvania, northern 2/3 of New Jersey, southern New York, southern New England, seeing the most snowfall out of this one for Tuesday into Wednesday next week. So we see that kind of taking place, a little bit less hefty than that one coming up just Saturday to Sunday. So again, this is just a few days later, but a little bit less major. The interesting thing is again, we see the southeast ridge kind of flex here, and we get a low kind of moving straight up like this. Again, that's going to be a very, very common storm track here. And we get another low, this one taking aim a little bit further north, maybe for the interior areas like the Northeast here, Ohio Valley and parts of the Midwest, seeing the snowfall. And then we get this boundary with some rain and ice. It's a little bit messy in there. Cold front dragging behind here. Pretty intense thunderstorms could be possible once again. Kind of goes without saying, but remember what I said, the southeast ridge is kind of what's creating this possibility. So as long as that's a feature, we will likely see thunderstorms for the most part with every system that moves through. We do see another kind of western system moving in with some rainfall again for the lower areas and coastal areas, with snowfall in the Sierra Nevada mountains. We get a weaker low up to the northwest with some northern Rockies and northern Cascades snowfall as well. And once again, we're getting accumulating snowfall here for parts of the Ohio Valley and Northeast, maybe parts of the northern Mid-Atlantic. But really, this storm is so close to the coast, and it has this warm nose with this strong southeast ridge, to where we're basically seeing an interior northeastern snowfall event here. New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, special kind of for the most part. And it's worth noting, this is 1 p.m. We have your low here, dragging cold front underneath. You have this really intense warm and humidity nose right there, and likely a hefty thunderstorm event, maybe even severe weather, if this plays out this way, because we have a strong cold front, high amounts of precipitation along it, and we have very warm and humid air out ahead of it. That's kind of all the puzzle pieces you need. So I could see where, come late, mid to late next week, we could be talking about some thunderstorm and severe weather threats along the southeast, just a week from today, actually. So just take notes of that. We do see out west, this storm is getting a little bit more intense, maybe one of our more intense Sierra Nevada mountain snowfall events this winter so far. They're a little hard to come by in La Niñas. This is La Nina that we're in, and we're seeing one right here possibly. So that could be good news for the ski resorts out there, and lots of rainfall for California, where, again, pretty hard to come by in La Niñas. As we keep going, I want to take this straight towards Friday. Your snow system's moved out. But out west, we just go crazy. Multiple low pressure systems, all the mountain ranges seeing snowfall. Almost this entire circle that I just drew is filled with precipitation. So a very, very intense storm pattern as we approach a week from now and just a little bit beyond out west could be occurring. Thunderstorms along the deep south and southeast here happening for Friday the 14th. Saturday the 15th here. Keep in mind, this is right around when we saw a major blizzard in yesterday's video for areas of the mid-Atlantic and northeast. And I am noticing huge changes on this European model, as we always note. You know, when you're looking beyond 7 days, 10 days, you start to see some pretty crazy changes. The fact of the matter is that we still have some major storminess popping up, as I mentioned earlier, and they're very consistent with that. We're just seeing it move around a lot, and there's two major players. To start things out, Saturday the 15th here, we see a 997 right here over Missouri. We get some secondary low pressure trying to develop off the East Coast. A big part of this is, are we going to see this one just be the primary low? Because if we do, this one's going to move up, and we're going to see the most major snowfall way back west for areas along the plains, Midwest, Great Lakes, and Ohio Valley. We could see a major snow system in there. If the energy transfers offshore, which we do see happen a lot, and this one kind of just breaks up, we could see the more major snowfall on the eastern end. Also, it's worth noting this is Friday or Saturday the 15th. Yesterday's video, we saw this storm move in around the late 16th into the 17th. So if it moves in earlier, the cold air isn't in place. That can cause problems for snowfall. But if it moves in a little bit later, we see a bit more cold air, and that allows for more snowfall to take place further east. So there's a lot of moving pieces. I know I'm getting a little bit repetitive now, but this looks like a really decent setup for severe weather here. In this heavier pocket of precipitation, at least thunderstorms in here, very possible. We're seeing heavy snowfall already starting out from the northern plains and upper Midwest. Areas of the Great Lakes seeing some snowfall, and even the northeast here seeing snowfall by the afternoon hours of Saturday the 15th. Things intensify quickly. By 7 p.m., we see a 991 over Illinois. Deep diving Arctic air here. Probably a lot of wind. This is a potential blizzard with this type of look. When we see these blue lines and red lines here very close together, that's indicative of very, very strong winds. To have a blizzard, you need very strong winds, and you need very heavy snowfall. And when we have this combination, that is what creates blizzard conditions, where visibility is very reduced. You get the snow drifts all over the place, very impactful. It has nothing to do with total snowfall amounts, everything to do with visibility. So yes, this is potential blizzard conditions right here, what we're seeing over the Midwest. As we keep going towards the early hours of the 16th here, this will be Sunday on the 16th, 7 a.m., and we see the Great Lakes and Ohio Valley still seeing snowfall from a now 971 millibar low pressure center. Very, very intense there. Nearby, maybe Toronto, so somewhere between Michigan, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, New York, seeing that major low pressure system. Northern New England seeing heavy snowfall, haven't really mixed over to rainfall there. And then finally, what we see is a lot of this pressure as we reach overnight kind of transfers offshore. Finally, 974 there, and we're getting heavy, heavy snowfall for areas of northeastern Pennsylvania up through New York and northern New England. Once again, for Sunday afternoon on the 16th. That sticks around all the way through 7 p.m. Here's 1 a.m. on Monday the 17th, and we're continuing to see that snowfall and very cold air after this point as well. But you can imagine if the low is just moving in by this point, it would be somewhere like here, and this would prime all of these areas to see heavy snowfall. So the timing really changes things. I will say, expect more major changes with this one. Don't lock, I think that the main thing that we are growing confidence in is that we could see a low pressure system in the 980s, 970s combined with cold air for somebody, whether that's the upper Midwest, Great Lakes, Ohio Valley, Northeast Mid-Atlantic. Somebody's likely, or at least semi-likely at this point, to see a more major low pressure system and featuring heavy, heavy snowfall. Now, I know some people enjoy that type of commentary from me and type of kind of heads up. Other people are like, well, so it's just a guess, you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, it's 10 days out. There's no way to give specific information. But if we can dissect some useful information, I feel like it helps people out to just know that there is some things that are becoming more and more likely over time. A lot of people Even if things don't happen, like to have the heads up of things that are looking more and more likely to happen, even if it doesn't pan out. So that's kind of where we lie with this one, especially at the 10-day mark. As we keep going, we see that snowfall comes to an end over the Monday morning time frame. We're left with an overall colder, kind of showery, snow showery pattern here for a lot of the east. The southeast ridge finally getting beat out by this major trough. We get a pretty consistent positive PNA out west there with some snowfall across the Rockies, maybe even the Cascades. As we keep going, we start to grow another storm system here. Kind of looks like a January system that we just had. We see the originating area of disturbance over the western Gulf of Mexico, Gulf of America. I don't know what to call it at this point, but the northwestern area there of the Gulf. I've just been calling it the Gulf of America. It doesn't roll off the tongue yet. I've said Gulf of Mexico for probably, I don't know, 6-7 years I've been doing this YouTube channel, so it is a little bit hard to break the habit. If, once the National Hurricane Center and everybody's calling it Gulf of America, that's what I'm going to refer to it as, just to not cause confusion. For me, that's just what it is. It's pretty hard when things get renamed to get used to it. I could care less what it's called. So we're just going to go with whatever the official guidance is calling it to make things easier. We do see that area of disturbances popping up, Texas and the northwestern Gulf. We do see some snowfall here across the Rockies, across the Cascades happening. We also see that by the time we're reaching Wednesday, on February 19th here, this is picking up some steam, thunderstorm activity in the plains, the deep south here. We're seeing some thunderstorms pop up. Also snowiness kind of uptick here across the northwest, rainfall in the lower elevations, but we are seeing this uptick of activity here. As we can see, we're going to move this forward again. We do get more snowfall across the upper Midwest, Ohio Valley from this one. It is weaker in nature. We see the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast see some activity. And then finally, the low wants to get its act together once it's off the Southeast, but it's almost too little too late. I do think that if we do see a system around this time frame, it does have potential to be a little bit more than this. But once you're beyond like 10 days, it's kind of tough to say if this will even be a system at this point. But it is important to note that the model continuing to show storms popping up and moving through is something that we can take away. We've successfully been able to use that to predict stormier patterns and continued storminess. So, don't pay too much attention to the specific location, specific impacts, or specific timing. Specific, general timing is important, but specific timing, like, it's Friday at 7 a.m., the low's offshore. Don't pay too much attention to that type of stuff. The models continue to show cold. The models continue to show storms. That is the thing that may remain accurate from this outlook here, not the specifics once we're beyond, 12, 15 days out. Snowfall in the northwest looks to continue. Again, that's another thing we can take away. More storms moving on shore there. Definitely worth noting. GFS model, we always tend to just glance through look for differences, but we see everything's going to be the same for probably the next 3, 4, or 5 days. We do see this system around Tuesday the 11th. Some snowfall much more prevalent across the Mid-Atlantic and lower Ohio Valley. We see the lower Midwest here, Nebraska, Kansas, Missouri for 1 a.m. on Tuesday the 11th. What we see by the time we're reaching about 4 p.m. is a lot of the Midwest and Ohio Valley, lower Ohio Valley, seeing some heavier snowfall, and even areas of northern Virginia, DC, Maryland, Delmarva, southern Pennsylvania, southern New Jersey, seeing a lot more snowfall here next week. And we don't really get as bad of a warm nose. We see that there is a lot of snowfall further south here, more of a Mid-Atlantic special, and the European model by this time frame has most of the snowfall in New England. So there is some discrepancy. Will it be the Mid-Atlantic? Will it be the Northeast? Will it be both? There is some question marks, and this is right around 5 days out, so we do have some wiggle room. Typically, the GFS model tends to be a little too far to the southeast, so we will watch this closely. Wouldn't be surprised if the European model's right and we see mostly the northern areas see more of the snowfall. But the GFS model has had some recent successes when being further southeast than the rest of the models. It's just hard to say which one will be right. Everybody always asks me, what's the best model? And it's really, you don't know until really after, or until we get closer and one folds to the other or anything like that. It's just really tough to say because even if the European model is right 7 out of 10 times and the GFS 3 out of the 10 times, you just don't know when you're in the 3 out of 10 times. Is this the 3 out of 10 times or is this the 7 out of 10 times? It's just hard to say. As we keep going, we see that just brings hefty amounts of snowfall, and we get a second one after it. The second one is more for New England and the Northeast here, as you can see, for the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday time frame. Even maybe a third one trying to pop up there for the southern mid-Atlantic. A little bit more minor, but a kind of light to moderate snowfall event for West Virginia, Virginia, kind of that lower mid-Atlantic area. And then we get another system here. This is Saturday the 15th, Sunday the 16th, and this is right when the European model has a major low over Illinois that eventually transfers offshore here. The GFS model just takes it straight up the East Coast, but it's too far offshore and it's not too major. But we do get some moderate snowfall in these areas, just nothing major like the European model is showing. I guess it does get kind of close there. That energy starts to transfer way closer to the coast. We get down into the 980s, so another strong low pressure system. That's kind of weird how this one pops up. But we do see that the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast do end up seeing snowfall from this one around the 16th, 17th as well, even dropping into the 970s, 976. So again, models pretty much consistently calling for a low in the 980s, 970s, something like that around this 15th, 16th, 17th time frame. And I will keep every single day monitoring this specific situation. We will see if the models end up completely going away with this, which I think is a little bit unlikely. I think that if anything, we would see maybe a weaker system or a different location. But again, we'll see what the models do with it together. We will break it down and we will remain aware of what the models are calling for. But that ends up dropping quite a bit of snowfall. And then the southeast ridge starts to play a way bigger role after the 18th, 19th. Look at this. I mean, your jet stream is just a huge ridge over the east coast here. This would bring back the 60s and 70s to these areas around the 20th. And we see that just kind of continue. A storm goes over top here around the 21st. That's a Friday. Right here, snowfall to the north, maybe even the northeast. But again, this is when we don't look into specifics too much. But we get another one forming right after. So frequent storms and a more active southeast ridge after kind of like the 18th, 19th is what this GFS model shows, which is pretty different than the European model, by the way. When we look at the total precipitation, tons out west, tons for a lot of the east here. This is what we've been saying for a couple of days because the models haven't really faltered from this at all. When we look at the anomalies, we see above average for a majority of your mountainous west and even the lower areas along the west. And then for a lot of these areas, kind of from the deep south straight up through portions of the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast, we just see this above average precipitation bubble in these areas. Pretty intense too. The blues are a couple of inches above average for a 2-week period. So that's not a huge amount of time to be seeing inches above average. This is going to be a wet couple of weeks for these areas in the dark greens and blues, to say the least. Total snowfall in the European model, these are going to be a little bit different from each other. The European model, mountainous west, is a whole lot. We're going to see that on both models. So this is the one thing that is going to stay consistent between both that we look at. That area is going to see a ton. We do see further north snowfall in this European model. So we're talking northern plains, upper Midwest, Great Lakes, into the northeast, seeing 1 to 2, and then for the northeast, even maybe 3 or 4 feet of snowfall on this European model. The lower areas, like the plains, lower Ohio Valley, so like the southern half of the Ohio Valley, areas in here maybe seeing a bit of snow, upwards of maybe 6, 7, 8 inches, which for those areas in the purples, that is the 6-inch plus, I'm sure they wouldn't be upset about it, but they're, where is that going to hit? Is it going to move around a little bit? Or are you going to be in the blue, the gray, the purple? This is an area where it's a little bit more hit or miss. But when we look, I'll zoom into the east. That's what I've been doing. So we'll look at this real quickly. But we do see, again, huge amounts for New England and New York, even for some of the areas in Michigan there. And then much, much less down here for the Mid-Atlantic and Ohio Valley. Although the northern corridors here are approaching or above 10 inches. So a little bit better for those more northern areas. GFS model here is going to be a little bit better for the Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic, Central Plains, and we don't really sacrifice too much on the northern end. We still end up with a huge amount up here as well. So I think most people would be more happy with the GFS solution. Once again, mountainous west looking great. All of these areas in the pinks likely, according to this model, 8, 9, 10, 12, 14 inches, maybe more for some of these areas. So definitely maybe 1 or 2, maybe more plowable snowfall events in there. Let's once again zoom into the east here. And like I said, I mean, there is still some spots seeing a little bit less than 6 inches, but a lot of these kind of lower Midwest, Ohio Valley, Mid-Atlantic folks would probably prefer this, where we're seeing maybe 1 to 2 feet for a lot of the areas in here, like DC, Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York City, even Pittsburgh in there. So we're seeing a lot of these areas where I get a lot of comments from seeing a really good amount of snowfall in there. But again, when we compare this to the European model, we're looking at massive differences because a lot of these cities in here, maybe with the exception of New York City, are seeing way under a foot, maybe under half a foot at maybe like 2, 3, 4, 5 inches over the next 2 weeks. So this is a massive, massive difference between the GFS and the European model, which definitely means you should take it with a grain of salt. There is massive changes that could occur. You know, if either one of these are right, it's going to have massive implications because there's huge differences between the two. But again, New England, Northeast, likely seeing feet in either case. Let's see. Yeah, very similar amounts, maybe like a little bit more on the European model, but very similar results for the Northeast here in either case. Let's take a look at the temperature pattern according to your European model. And again, this warmth is going to be flexing at times still, but we start to trend colder, especially after like the 9th, 10th here, and especially if you're further north. And look at your southeast ridge again, a lot more secluded to the south here than what the National Weather Service is showing, which is why I kind of disagree with them a little bit on that one. At times it'll flex up to the north like they show, but this is not sustainable. This is like 12 hours at a time. It'll flex way to the north like that. Here's like the 16th. Again, really briefly, it goes up the East Coast, but then we get really brutal cold air coming in afterwards for Monday the 17th, Tuesday the 18th, Wednesday the 19th. We're warm out west basically from the 14th onward. We're cold from now to the 14th out west. And then we start to warm up. That's a positive PNA developing. And as we reach later on in the pattern, I mean, this is the end of it, 21st. Very warm here over the west. And continued Arctic blasts looking to move into the east. So maybe going to end off February on a cold note. It just depends. The GFS model, what we're going to look at in a moment, doesn't look quite as bullish for the long-term sustainable cold that we're seeing here on this European model. Let's take a look at it. Again, southeast ridge isn't as dominant as what the National Weather Service is showing. And then we get really cold around the 16th, 17th, 18th. But look at this. The warmth moves right around, moves into the east, and then we see a more dominant positive or southeast ridge here straight through the 22nd. So from like the 19th to the 22nd, dominant warmth here in the east, and the cold really redirects towards the west, which is basically a flip into a direction that would likely cause more long-term warmth in the east after this cold pattern, talking beyond the 18th, 19th time frame. I know we're looking out very far. Things can definitely change at this range, even in the temperature pattern, especially when both models completely disagree on what things look like after that kind of 18th, 19th time frame. So that's when the uncertainty grows a lot. We'll have to wait and see what ends up happening. As we get closer, we'll probably have a better idea. So be sure to subscribe. We upload every single day. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.